You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. So a lot of people obviously been demanding that political leaders do something. This is the first salvo coming from Democrats in the House. Your thoughts?
I do believe that the bill that was put forth today included a number of different elements that we all know that we need. And so I was encouraged to see exactly some of these key points that were included in the bill. And I was disappointed, quite frankly, to see that people were so distracted by kente cloths. Okay, let's keep our eye on the ball now. Okay, the bill actually made sense. Let's focus on that. But the other thing that we need to focus on is the fact that, unless we take over the Senate and the White House in November, the chances of that bill actually becoming law under this regime is probably resides somewhere between 0 and none. And so if Democrats are savvy, they will use this as a campaign tool, as an example of what they are positioned to deliver to the Black community specifically in exchange for their support. I think people are right in saying that we should expect deliverables for our vote. And this is a prime example of a deliverable that the Democrats need to be very clear that they can deliver come January, if they're able to take over both houses of Congress and the presidency in November.
Brittany, what about that? Because, again, at the end of the day, the House Democrats can do one thing, but if Mitch McConnell doesn't take it up in the Senate, the bill goes nowhere. But let's just talk about the House right now. According to Karen Bass, Congresswoman from California, chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, they already have more than 200 co-sponsors in the House and the Senate.
Sure. And, I'm not going to sit here and say that we shouldn't support that bill. We should support the bill. It's an important step forward. However, I don't want us to stop with that bill. I think that we've seen some of the things that they're addressing, specifically, changing the way in which we identify use of force, also talking about de-escalation techniques, talking about, making people take racial justice training. And I think that we've seen these implemented in other local departments, and we've still seen these reforms fail us, Roland. So, I'm not saying I think we should support it. We should push it forward, but we need to continue to push for more. Because I'm fearful that, unfortunately, the reality is Black skin is seen as a threat, no matter how many weeks of racial training we take, or no matter how many body cameras we have on, because we've known historically, police turn those off every now and then.
Well, but I think Maj, what's key here is that this is the federal level. The reality is there's action that must be taken by state legislatures, by county officials, by city officials, and so everything can't be addressed in a federal bill. Right? Do you hear me? We're not hearing you. We need you to unmute your button.
Hear me now?
There we go. Go ahead.
Yeah, I also think that to everyone's point, yes, I agree with the fact that, this is a great start. This is a ground foundation, like Reddit was saying. But I think that there's things that also could be added to this. Some also along the lines of we're saying some of these things are very vague. I would like to see some of that information go into conflict resolution and some of those funds in the defunding concept of it. Well, let's put some money towards actually training the citizens. And I'm not saying that the citizens are responsible for their own deaths. But what I am saying is we are responsible, as we all see it, over the last week, the police will leave. I think that we have to start talking about the conversation in regards to how are we arming urban Americans. I know this conversation, a lot of people are with the hands up, don't shoot thing, at Black Guns Matter. We are here to inform and arm Black America. Just like my gay friends don't get bashed, for the most part, armed, responsible firearms owners, when they have the ability to actually defend themselves when an officer's not shooting them in their car. I would like to see some energy go in that direction as far as, that way. I just don't want us to get caught up in these things start away. We're going into an election year. We're a few months out. This is a great thing. These guys will go to jail. Hopefully these guys will go to jail. And then we simmer down again when this gets pushed under the rug. So I would like to see more specifics in regards to the defunding. where that money is being allocated to.
Well, here's the deal.
Well
in a moment, we're going to discuss defunding. But remember, Congress can't defund. Now, granted, there are federal dollars that go to local police departments, but the defunding part is actually going to come from city officials. And I think that's what's important for our audience to understand, that when we talk about this whole idea of police reform, I think historically a lot of people have made the mistake into somehow thinking, oh, Congress, y'all act. When the fact of the matter is, the Minneapolis City Council, when they voted to defund, that they only have the power. They control the city resources that fund the police department. When you talk about going after the system, I think what you are seeing when you look at these Confederate statues being torn down, when you look at folks being fired, when you look at the Variety editor-in-chief writing a column on diversity, and then she gets smacked by a former staffer, and then they have her step down. Then you got folks getting fired. You got 7 Republican county chairs who've been sharing these George Floyd conspiracy memes, and then now you got the governor of the state and the lieutenant governor, both Republicans, telling them y'all need to step down, not take office. There is a reckoning that is taking place, and this is where we should not be ratcheting it down, but I say ratcheting it up.
Yeah, I 100% agree. But what I would, again, encourage everyone to do, I think we had these conversations and they're going to pull back with the police. We're going to defund and all of those different things. We need to be armed. We need to be educated. We need to be in shape. We need to be in position. I think that, again, it's the Sankofa conversation. We kind of got to look backwards a little bit to move forward. When I think about these types of things, Harriet Tubman wasn't someone that was, trying to get things done just with good intentions. I think that our community, because we've seen so much ignorance and negligence around firearms, we also forget that these firearms and proper, safe, responsible ownership of them is what has helped us. When you're talking about Dr. King, you're talking about SNCC, you're talking about, Dr. King had his nonviolent arm of it, but there were a lot of, guys that came home from different types of military understanding that, we have to be armed to protect ourselves. The reality is America was built on money and violence. America was built on the back of black people. That's just the reality of it. When we want these things to stop, you have to either attack their money violently or you have to be willing to defend yourself. That is the primary goal here. Legislation is great. But we're talking about officers. I mean, hate crimes, murder, that's been unlawful for however long now. They've been lynching people for however long.
But here's the piece, though. How does us arming ourselves change education? How does us arming ourselves deal with health disparities? How does arming ourselves deal with wealth inequality? This whole issue we're talking about goes beyond arming ourselves.
Well, absolutely it does. We can deal with this is a holistic approach. Just like there's a solid group of good things in this legislation.
Right. So I ask you, how does arming ourselves lead to police reform?
So the same reason how police reform happened when people were getting brutalized when the Black Panthers stood up. The same way that we are in spaces right now, we got to look at the stats. In areas where there is more gun control, more less educated black people that are armed, violent crimes are up, which seemingly justifies law enforcement officers coming into our community, controlling and patrolling. So what you can't, listen, at a certain point, now this is just one angle of it. This is just one angle. At the same time, when we're talking about the firearms being there, I want brothers to be armed and responsible and lawful. So when they are accosted or attempting to be accosted by law enforcement officers that are corrupt, one, they're not going to jail because they got a dirty gun on them. That's one angle. That's my angle at Black Guns Matter. When we're talking about legislation around arming black people, when we do these classes for free all across the country, we're talking about safe and responsible ownership. We also add in conflict resolution and political education.
But again, though, I'm still stuck on. I get you supporting arming us, but what is still confusing is how does arming ourselves actually lead to systemic changes in police departments? How?
You do not utilize people, just like those racists in Fishtown that were protecting their neighborhoods because they were armed with bats. I am not a person that's going to continue allowing police to brutalize us.
Okay, so that means, so you're saying that what? If you see a police officer committing police brutality, then folks should be firing on those cops?
I think that one step is, for me, for example, Roland, if I see somebody attacking you, police officers, I'm going to jump in that fray. Everything doesn't mean go right to a firearm, because there's a difference there between being armed and being a firearm. I want Black people to have enough pride for themselves to be willing to step in when we see somebody after minute 1, minute 2. I went to Minneapolis. I was there and I did a firearm safety class right at where George Floyd was murdered last week in Minneapolis. I would have loved for someone, knowing that officer was killing a Black man, for instead of 20 people to record it, I would have loved for one Black man to jump in and potentially save his life.
Okay, so if one Black man jumps in to save his life, and then the cops then have probable cause to fire on him for obstructing the police, and so now we're dealing with.
Do you want to stand up and fight against these things?
No. Actually, no. What I actually want is I don't want more Black people dying.
I'm tired of the argument that we cannot fight back. I am tired of
that. You can go buy as many guns as you want to. There were 4 officers on the scene. Hold on.
I'm not talking about guns at this moment.
No, wait a minute. There were 4 officers on. Hold on. There were 4 officers on the scene.
If I'm talking about in one scenario, because you're asking me 4 different questions at a time.
No, actually, I'm not. I asked one.
If I see you, my brother, if I see any police officers or any of these beautiful people in this panel right here, if I see officers, we as Black people have the right. It doesn't have to necessarily be a firearm. We have the right to. I'll gladly catch that case to save any of these sisters' life or your life, my brother.
Actually,
and I think Black
we don't have.
Actually, that on the scene as well.
Actually, based upon the law,
is a part of it.
Actually, based upon the law, we don't.
Is a part of it. Education reform is a part of it. Civics is a part of it. Being responsible is a part of it.
But you actually,
our lives don't matter.
You don't have the right, because the law is in their hands. If you obstruct,
that's not true. That's not true. The Supreme Court precedent said that if you see officers initiating an unlawful arrest, you are well within your rights to stop that officer up into death. And we got proof of that. Tupac shot 2 off-duty police officers.
But wait a minute.
Did he go to jail and he saved his life?
But wait a minute. When you talk about determining what is an unlawful act, it's no different than when the officer told Sandra Bland, get out of the car. The moment, and see, first of all, you're talking about the moment he gave her that directive, according to Texas law, it did not matter if she thought why he stopped her was not proper. The moment he gives a directive, Texas law says you are to obey the directive. It doesn't matter if you think it's unlawful. That's why he did it.
Let me tell you something, Roland. Let me share something with you. You're talking about law, and I'm talking about saving Black people's lives.
Okay, what I'm talking about, no. You can't say you have the right if you did not talking about law.
I'm going to goalpost a little bit in this
Okay. Actually, I'm not. What I'm trying to explain to you is,
this is my brother.
No, hold up, bro. Follow me here. I'm born and raised in Texas. I saw the entire video. The moment that state trooper told Sandra Bland to get out of the car, she was compelled to follow his directive. She said, why? She did nothing wrong. It did not matter if she did nothing wrong. At that very moment, the moment she said no, she was actually breaking the law. That's actually law.
You know who else said no? You know what other women said no? Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks, Ida B. Wells. This notion, slavery was
Bro, hold up. Okay, hold on. Stop. Hold on 1 second. I'm gonna pick this back up. Hold on. No. Hold on. Okay. You can't say. Hold on 1 second. 1 second.
Catch that case
1 second.
And save George
1 second.
Floyd's life.
You can't say on one hand. Now, follow me here. You can't say on one hand we have the right to do something if the law says you don't. Because we're talking about, again, will we achieve form? You're making the point about why we must arm ourselves. I'm gonna bring Avis and Brittany into this. And I'm looking at this, and I'm still trying to arrive at how do you achieve that if you're arming yourself when what you're talking about has nothing to do with arming yourself. Brittany, what are your thoughts on all this?
Oh, well, okay. So in terms of arming, like, let me say this. I don't think, we discuss the history of the Black community using firearms and using arms to protect ourselves. I specifically think of the messaging around Martin Luther King and how folks are like, oh, he was nonviolent in his efforts, but a lot of folks don't realize that he was also supported by the Deacons of Defense. So I will give that to the folks who are pro-firearm. At the same time, I think that we run the risk with firearms, and again, this is not my specialty, but I think we do run the risk with firearms of, if we're a person of color, we're using that firearm against the police state. I think that it in their mind, it will justify the means of violence that they will use against us, if that makes sense. So, I think it's a complex and nuanced issue, and there's just a million different directions that we can go. But it's a tough one. And again, firearms is not our only solution to this issue. We know that there's several changes that need to take place, and we have to be careful with firearms.
Well, again, the point I'm making is, I get the argument arming yourself. Charles Cobb wrote a book called "This Nonviolent Stuff Will Get You Killed." I got that. Understand it. I understand all of that. But what I'm still trying to ascertain is, what does arming yourself have to do with police reform, Avis?
Well, first thing I want to say is I want to thank the brother for saying that he would catch a case for me. I appreciate that. Okay, I appreciate that. And as someone who grew up around firearms, I think it's important that people know that the Second Amendment goes both ways. I think that's an important thing that everyone knows, and that our community also embraces. I know, just when it comes to me and my house and protecting my children, I want to be able to do that. And, if anyone rolls up on my house, I want to know that I can protect myself and my family, right? Now, what makes this complex is the issue that you state, and what was so unfortunately true is that, when it comes about, when we look at what happened, for example, to MOVE in Philadelphia, there are so many examples of the state exerting tremendous amounts of violence against Black people from the very beginning of our, introduction to these shores. I understand theoretically where the brother is coming from, because to me, his argument is ultimately, it's a big picture argument. To me, his big picture argument is, hey, if people understand that there is a price to pay, perhaps behavior will change. I believe that's his big picture argument. But I also know that in the short term, and maybe and the long term, that Black people are being killed in every situation. And I think that in an attempt to defend ourselves, as we have a right to do, I agree with that.
Here's the deal. I mean, but it's still, it's the second.
When it comes to law enforcement, that they will use anytime. I mean, honestly, they will go over and above the call of duty,
of course,
in order to meet any sort of even perceived threat. It doesn't even have to be a real threat. Any perceived threat with overwhelming force.
Here's the deal. Okay, Second Amendment is the Second Amendment. Applies to everybody. Philando Castile had a license, still got shot and killed. Yeah. I'm still trying. So again, making the argument about Black folks arming themselves is a separate argument. I'm still trying to ascertain, how do you do that to achieve police reform? That was the question. So it's a different discussion if we say, hey, let's encourage Black people to get armed. Okay, got it. You can go buy a gun. It's the Second Amendment. How does that achieve police reform?
So there's several things. One, first, I want to say thanks to, Roland. I hope I get passionate about these things when we're talking about, our people being murdered unarmed. My primary objective is to make sure that they have the means to defend themselves, to protect life. I think you initially brought up something in regards to, what's lawful, but I'm more concerned with falling in alignment with saving life. Again, we have scenarios where a lot of things have been lawful, but that doesn't mean that they were morally correct. So I kind of want to add that distinction here. In regards to how we change, I can go with my lived experience. I got a firearm on me right now. I carry a firearm every single place that I go. I deal with law enforcement a lot. When going back to the Philando Castile thing, one of our classes, what we deal with in our classes is knowing the law, to your point. Minnesota is not a duty to notify state. Duty to notify means you have a duty to notify a law enforcement officer when you're pulled over if you have a firearm on you. Minnesota is not a duty to notify state. Philando Castile, and not knowing that information, and I want to be very clear on how I say this. God bless him. The work that he did working with young people, his family, they will never see him again. If I could have jumped into Philando Castile's body and tell him, hey, man, you have no legal obligation to tell this coward, officer at the time, that you have a firearm. I think that scenario goes a little bit differently. So education about being armed and knowing the laws, to your point, Roland, is how we not only save life, but we also, when those rights are being violated, when you're talking about, I spoke earlier about attacking people's money violently, we have to start suing the state. I hear so many guys in the class that say they got pulled over, they weren't speeding, but then they don't want to go to court. A big part of this is knowing the law, educating the people about their rights, that, to be perfectly honest, in our democratic cities and our urban centers all across the country, those laws are not applied equally. Let's just be real.
But I'm going back to, first of all, everything you're saying is absolutely correct. Know the law, know the provisions, which is also why I'm making the point about when you say know the law. So, for instance, I go back to what happened to Sandra Bland. The problem that we have, which is why I'm dealing with police reform. The problem that we have is you have officers who know the law, who know what buttons to push, and then know how to get somebody. You play that video back, he knew he had pissed her off. He knew that she was agitated when she was smoking that cigarette when he told her to put it out. And the moment he gave her a lawful command and she resisted, that's when he began to pull on the door, and at that very moment, she was under arrest. Because even if I am in the car, and if I know what you're doing is BS, I know what you're saying is BS, the moment you give the order based upon that state, then I have to comply. Now, there are some places where if the officer demands for your ID, you have to show them. We showed a video out of Chicago where this cop rode up on these two brothers, and there was another brother who was videotaping. He started reciting the law because that was that particular state. I want the people who are watching to understand that you might be in New Jersey, and somebody else might be in Georgia, and somebody else might be in California, somebody else might be in North Carolina, and the law ain't the same. It's based upon your state in terms of understanding the law. And that was the whole point there. And so, again, I think it's a separate conversation about making the argument about African Americans being armed. I still believe that is a separate discussion than police reform.
Well, I think, yes, I do agree with you that those are separate discussions because just, again, like we were talking about, all of these, even in this legislation, there's different levels and layers to it. So I think you're talking armed. When you're talking about knowing the law, that is a part of being armed. I walk around.
No. I'm talking about knowing the law. I don't even carry a gun. I better know the law in my state because I need to understand when somebody rolls up and, again, understand that. And so here's the deal. I work in D.C. I live in Virginia. I also live in my home in Texas. I might be thinking, well, Texas law is this. That don't mean a damn thing if I'm getting stopped in Richmond, Virginia. I need to also know the law in Richmond.
We're saying the same thing. What we're talking about, again, there was a reason why they didn't want us to read books like the one that you mentioned here. There's a reason why they want you to read, More Guns, Less Crime, so forth and so on, because that's still a form of arming. Now, I'm not saying that, hey.
About 20 seconds. I got to go to the next guest. Go, about 20 seconds. Go. No. Seriously, I got Senator Cory Booker holding. So make your point.
If anybody wants information on it, hit me
up. No. Maj, you're not off the show yet. I'm saying you got 20 seconds to finish that point so I can bring on the next guest.
Be armed, be informed, get a CCW app, know the laws of your municipality and state to start out.
All right, folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment. The folks with Ceek.com, Ceek.com, for partnering with us. This is Mary Spio is the creator, the innovator, the founder of this company. She, of course, designed these 4D 360-degree headphones that are absolutely amazing. We've got a partnership with them, folks. If you purchase these headphones, you can use the promo code RMVIP2020, RMVIP2020. Simply go to Ceek.com. That's CEEK.com. Be sure to check it out. We thank them for partnering with us.